but don't see them as too many things, because each one of them is interconnected with the other theme into a holistic idea of evolving, kickstarting, stimulating, inspiring, expanding your research, casting it on a new pedestal, or making it more contemporary, because the strong theme in our conference in last 6 years is contemporary legal research. How to make it contemporary. And what is contemporary? Time is not a frozen kind of concept. Time is an ongoing concept. Like a river, it flows. And strategy is about that awareness of time. So research, if you want to use as a strategy for human welfare, I'm sure it has to be contemporary. It has to have a sense of past, as Eliot says. It has to have a sense of future, as scientists say. So I'm sure that this conference will be beneficial to each and every one of you. And I hope by the end of the conference, we will have at least 100 new ideas coming about. And at least 25 of them, in patents we say, not even 10% converts into, rolls out into industry. I hope that out of this conference in next 2 days or 48 hours nearly, we will be able to have at least 50% of the research. That's a tall order, but at least 50% of the research ideas coming into a fruition in next 2 months into an article or a book or a quickly submitted PhD thesis or a well worked out outline of an LLM dissertation. All the best, and once again a warm welcome to each and every one of you.
May we take this opportunity to request the Director, Dr. Shashikala Gurpur, to kindly felicitate our Honorable Chief Guest for today, Professor Robert Adieh. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. May we also request ma'am to felicitate Professor Dr. G.S. Bajpai, sir. And Professor Dr. T.R. Subramanian.
LECSET is a biannual newsletter of our college which highlights on-campus and off-campus events of Symbiosis Law School, Pune. I would like to take this opportunity to request all the dignitaries to officially release the latest edition of the newsletter, LECSET 2017.
Just one moment, please. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable dignitaries. With that, we come to the end of inaugural session, and we shall be beginning with the plenary session now.
Good morning, and a very warm welcome to each and everyone present here. We all have gathered here today for the plenary session of the 6th Annual International Research Conference on Contemporary Legal Scholarship cum Legal Research Skills Training Workshop. I, Yashasvi Rohra, and I, Tuhina Sahai, shall be your hosts for this session. Professor Robert Adieh is the Vice Dean and KHG Professor of Private International Law and the Director of Center on Federalism and Intersystemic Governance at the Emory University School of Law, Atlanta, Georgia. He pursued his education in Yale Law School, Princeton University, and Moscow State Institute of International Relations. Sir has previously worked with the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Senator Arlen Specter, Vienna Academy for the Study of Future, to name a few. Sir has also been a visiting faculty in Georgetown University Law Center, Columbia University School of Law, Institute for Advanced Studies School of Social Sciences, and Princeton University. Moreover, he has written a book titled Russia's Constitutional Revolution, Legal Consciousness and the Transition to Democracy. He has also authored more than 30 different articles and book chapters and has 2 book projects and numerous articles in progress. Sir has numerous honors and fellowships such as American Bar Foundation Fellow, U.S. Department of Education, Foreign Languages and Area Studies Fellowship, Princeton University Academic Research Grant, to name a few. Professor Adieh has been in the academic field for a long time and has taught in 16 different universities, has 14 paper publications to his name and countless other presentations too. He has different affiliations with many institutions. I humbly welcome Professor Robert Adieh. Sir, we are honored to have you. I will now call upon Sir to address the gathering on the topic of applications of game theory in legal scholarship.
Good morning, all. It is a great honor and pleasure to be here. We are trying to get these slides up. Let me do one other thing. That's fine. No, I'll move closer to it. Let me just, let's move that. Okay. So it's a great honor and pleasure to be here. I will say professionally, it's wonderful to be here among such an esteemed gathering of things. I appreciate it so much. Dean Gurpur's wonderful and thoughtful welcoming remarks. It is also a personal pleasure to be here. My grandparents, although I've been to India many times, I have not been to Pune before, although my grandparents lived here for about 10, 15 years, many, many years ago. So it is wonderful to be here in that regard as well. I want to say just briefly about the program before I turn to my topic, my remarks. As I reviewed the program in advance, I was incredibly impressed by a number of things about the structure of the program. 4 things in particular I thought I wanted to mention. First is it's the trans-substantive nature of the program. Many conferences of this sort are directed to one subject, be it criminal law or international law or corporate law or whatever it might be. The fact that the gathering that you have brought together here cuts across so many disciplines makes it a much more engaging and wonderful learning opportunity, I think, for all of us. So that's the first. The second is the interdisciplinary nature of the program. I think it's a testament to the advanced level of research that is being conducted in India and here at Symbiosis, that the program is so interdisciplinary in nature. That is something that in many jurisdictions, in many countries, is not yet the norm. And so to see that in your program, I think, is a very impressive testament to the work that you all are doing. Another one is this sort of collaborative. As I thought about sort of the structure of the program and the way it's arranged, that it really is collaborative in a way that you have multiple law schools represented in terms of presentations, in terms of feedback, in terms of the program. And that really is a testament to the potential that I think the Indian Legal Academy has. The more you can work collectively, the greater the achievements we can expect to see. And finally, the last, and then I'll turn to my remarks, is the interactive nature of the program. Too often, learning consists of someone standing on a stage or at a screen or on whatever else it is and delivering remarks, but so much of the program, as Dean Gurpur was describing, will be interactive in the giving of feedback. And I think that, too, is a wonderful opportunity for learning that you all have created here. So I really commend the law school, commend Dean Gurpur, and commend all of you for really what is a very exciting and valuable program. So I think they're still work in progress. All right, that's fine. So so let me get started, and then the slides will show up when they show up. My topic today is applications of game theory in law. Now, my experience is that when I speak about game theory, there are different levels of experience with it. So I want to sort of do a little bit of basics, but then in particular, what I hope to accomplish over the course of my remarks is to introduce you to an aspect of the application of game theory to law that has not received a great deal of attention in the legal literature, but I think potentially may be an important one in a number of the research areas that many of you work in. So just to quickly introduce the topic to begin of game theory. So game theory, of course, is a branch of mathematics. Basically is an attempt to move away from traditional neoclassical models of interaction, of economic patterns, to engage the ways in which individuals and institutions can engage in a strategic fashion. So whether our interaction is cooperative or non-cooperative, whether it's characterized by conflict or not, game theory provides a way in which we can think about how my conduct, my behavior, my choices might impact your strategic choices and vice versa. There's one game theory in the law, exactly. Primarily game theory has been used in economics, in political science, and in psychology. However, it also has been used in a number of other areas over time: biology, computer science, and of course, law. The origins of game theory really are in many ways date back quite some time. There is work that we characterize as game theory-like, going back 200, 300 years to the work of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and others. But the real origins, when we think about game theory as we use it today, generally is dated back to the work of John von Neumann. He wrote an article in 1928 in which he introduced the notion that we might fruitfully, do you have a thing to? Oh, it's coming. Okay. He introduced the notion that we might use this frame of analysis in a productive fashion, and in particular, he wrote a very famous book called "A Theory of Games and Economic Behavior." A theory of games and economic behavior in 1944 that represented sort of the introduction of game theory to broader audiences. In the 1950s, there was a dramatic expansion in the use of game theory, in particular in the context of nuclear deterrence. So scholars studying nuclear deterrence at the beginning of the nuclear era were trying to figure out how we should systematically think about the kinds of interactions that occur among nuclear powers, and they stumbled upon game theory as a framework of analysis, and we saw tremendous growth in the use of game theory as a result. Also during the 1950s, a gentleman by the name of John Nash developed what was known as the Nash equilibrium. Some of you may know him from a movie called A Beautiful Mind. That was about him. If there's time in Q&A or later on today during a break, I can tell you about my own very unusual interactions and how I met John Nash. So use of game theory in the law then. So this is game theory generally. Early applications of economic analysis in law used neoclassical economics, basic microeconomics, as the frame of reference for how economics might be relevant in law. Beginning about 20 to 25 years ago, game theory was added to the mix. Increasingly, legal scholars began to use game theory as a point of reference. It was framed basically as a way to get at the challenges of interactions that did not fall to either the extreme of pure monopoly or pure competition. So if we are in a world of either pure competition or monopoly, standard neoclassical economic analysis is very, very effective and is a very, very powerful tool to help us understand the work that law and regulation might do. By contrast, if we were anywhere in between those extremes, interaction becomes strategic, and therefore game theory is potentially useful. So one way to think about it is almost everything that any of you might write about, game theory is potentially relevant to, because it almost always, the work that we do as law professors, as legal scholars, as law students, generally falls, generally falls in that zone in between the worlds of pure monopoly and pure competition. So I want to talk today about how we apply game theory, how game theory might be useful to us in the context of regulation, and how we design and understand regulation. So very briefly, because all of this will be familiar to you, traditionally when we are trying to rationalize or explain why we regulate, there's a set of economic justifications that are conventionally given for why we do so. I don't want to go through all of these because most of them will be familiar to you when we talk about collective action problems, free rider problems, public goods problems, the tragedy of the commons, negative externalities, natural monopoly, and information asymmetries. In all of these situations, we are basically sort of rationalizing why regulation is necessary in a given situation using one or another of these economic concepts. So it turns out that what game theory tells us about these various rationales is that all of them have a common theme. There is a common theme to all of these phenomena: collective action problems, free rider problems, so on and so forth. And that common theme is a dynamic of defection. A dynamic of defection. So the idea is that there is an optimal arrangement, agreement, structure for how we all should behave. But unfortunately, each of us individually has an incentive to defect from or to deviate from that agreed arrangement. Okay? So the idea is that there's something that if we could all agree to and stick with, it would be best for all of us. But each of us individually has the incentive to break from, to deviate from that arrangement, that situation. That basic dynamic of defection is captured by the classic prisoner's dilemma. So in game theory, the use of the prisoner's dilemma is an attempt to capture, to reflect that. Now, given shortness of time and the familiarity you will have with it, I don't want to spend too much time on the prisoner's dilemma, but this is the basic structure of it. You see behind me, you all know the story is that the prosecutor arrests two individuals. He tells each of them, for bank robbery, he tells each of them, if you confess and your partner does not confess, you will go free and he will go to jail for 10 years or a long time. Vice versa, if he confesses and you don't, you will go for a long time and they will go free. If neither of you confess, you'll be charged with some minor crime and go to jail for a short time. Here I have 1 year up there. And if both of you confess, then I don't really need either of your individual confessions, so you each will go to jail for 5 years. Now, why is that important? Because it creates this prisoner's dilemma. The idea is that although the best result here would be what? For both of them to remain silent. Both should remain quiet. If they both remain quiet, then each of them goes to jail for 1 year. But unfortunately, given the way the prosecutor has set up the payoffs, the incentives of each one is to deviate from that, is to defect from that. And therefore, where we end up in the prisoner's dilemma is in the lower right-hand corner. Both of them confess, and they both go to jail for 5 years. Okay, now, oftentimes when I present this, people say, but that's good, because they're criminals. But of course, we don't apply the prisoner's dilemma primarily to prisoners and criminals. We apply it in environmental law, in securities law, and other areas where it turns out we don't want people to defect. We want them to stay with that happy equilibrium in the upper left-hand corner, but they don't do so. So when we look at environmental law, as I said, we look at securities law, we look at workplace safety rules, we look at consumer welfare law. In all these areas, basically we have a dynamic akin to this. We have a dynamic in which there is a good equilibrium, a good dynamic that we would like to preserve, but because individual incentives are to defect, we get the bad result of lots of pollution, or lots of fraud, or lots of bad advertising to consumers, or whatever else it might be. Now, in the legal literature, what you will know, I'm sure all of you from your own studies and legal scholarship, is that the prisoner's dilemma is incredibly dominant. So the prisoner's dilemma, someone recently did a study and found more than 3,000 references to the prisoner's dilemma in just the US legal literature. So huge reference to the prisoner's dilemma and huge use of the prisoner's dilemma. And in some ways that's not surprising. If the prisoner's dilemma helps us understand securities law and environmental law and workplace safety law and consumer welfare law, it makes sense that the prisoner's dilemma would be the branch of game theory that is used most commonly. But I want to suggest to you today that the emphasis on the prisoner's dilemma may actually be masking other important